Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. I'm Gene Paranak. Today's our 33rd episode. It's Friday, October 30th, 2020. On the show today, something's coming back that we haven't seen in about 20 weeks, but we are bringing back what we used to call COVID Connect now as a segment of MedTech Crossroads. Because unfortunately, it's time to start talking about the COVID numbers again, at least here in Michigan. And we're going to show you some of the charts and graphs that we used to look at back in the spring because it's worth paying attention to at the moment. And we're going to start with that in just a moment. After that, my guests today, Jeff Wesley and Preem Badogla from Red Cedar Ventures and Michigan Rise. We're looking forward to talking with them. And then Taylor McPartland from Scale Health about their new partnership with MedHealth and TechTown here in Southeast Michigan. After that, we'll have Q&A like we always do. But first, I'm going to take you back to the world of COVID. And the first thing we're going to show is the Michigan PPE and bed tracking list. Right now, this does not look bad. Our friend Nikki Kennedy was one who has often reminded us that hospitals do want to run 70 or 80% capacity to be able to maintain their business. And those numbers are not getting excessive right now, but they are going up. So right now, and this is why we're going to start tracking this, and we'll bring this back next week as well. Your adult hospital beds, your hospital inpatient beds, and the occupancy, it's still okay, but these numbers again are coming up, as well as the ICU beds are coming up. So we're going to watch this in coming weeks to see where it goes. Of course, if you've been watching the national news, it's always hard to understand what's happening. We saw two peaks of hospitalizations throughout the year, one in the spring and then one in the summer. Of course, these were largely regional. The first was largely the Northeast, and the second was largely the South. But if we look at, for example, the state of Michigan, what we're seeing is another rise in hospitalizations. So while during the middle of the summer, it was very, very flat. Right now it is coming back up, and the deaths are coming back up. So we feel that, like we told you back at the end of the spring, we would bring this news back to you when the actual numbers were there to talk about. They're here now. We need to talk about them. We need to start to understand what they mean. So you can expect more guests on the COVID side of things as we come here into the fall. I wanted to bring this bit of news to you too, that the FDA is targeting pulse oximeters and oxygen concentrators. Because there are so many out there in the health and wellness market and the fitness market, at least the pulse oximeters, they're noticing that people are trying to self-treat. And what they're just pointing out to people is too much oxygen can also be a bad thing, as well as too little oxygen. So just a reminder that if you're having the symptoms, go to your doctor. Don't necessarily self-treat for this, because they're pointing out too much oxygen can be a bad thing, just like too little oxygen can. So again, this is on the FDA website, a point that they're making about pulse oximeters and at-home oxygen concentrators. Be careful, make sure you're using them under a doctor's supervision. Not too much to talk about, but the numbers are coming back up, so we want to bring you the news, and as we reach out in coming weeks, we're going to be talking to clinical experts about what is happening here with COVID. And with that, I want to invite our first guests on, Jeff Wesley and Preem Badogla from Red Cedar Ventures and Michigan Rise. How are you doing, guys?
Good. It's great to be here. Same
Welcome to
here.
the show. We're so glad you could make it. I hope you're inside somewhere nice and warm. We did a little teaser today and we were outside in the cold, and it's getting cold out there. So it's good to have you. Jeff is the executive director of Red Cedar Ventures and Michigan Rise, as well as Spartan Innovations. And Preem is the director of Michigan Rise and Red Cedar Ventures. And we're so glad to have you guys here today, because it's amazing what you guys have been doing both inside the MSU Foundation and inside MSU, as well as now with Michigan Rise, a fund that can reach outside the walls of the university. But before we talk about those, I wanted to just stop and pause and ask the question we always like to ask our guests. And Jeff, I'll start with you. What's your passion? You've been in business and startups and big businesses. You were the CEO of Two Men and a Truck, and then Acubite Dental Supply. You were the president of that. You've seen it all over from startups to big businesses. You must have a reason you're still doing these kinds of things. And then to get back into the world of startups and translation and funding, what's the passion that drives that?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I just appreciate, Prem and I both appreciate being here with you, and we thank you for all the great work you do. We're fortunate to be able to work with you with some of our startups, and we just appreciate how you can make a difference and help us on their path to commercialization. So kudos to you, and
Thank you.
just great work. My passion is, I've always loved business. It's kind of a vice for me. I love growing companies. I love working with people, and I love trying to make a difference. So I've had the blessing of being able to lead two great organizations and grow them and work with great teams. It's just something that's close to my heart, and I just enjoy that quite a bit. The other part of that that's important to me in my new role is, I just want to make a difference with the team between Spartan Innovations, Red Cedar, and Michigan Rise, and really create a cool ecosystem. We're off to a great start, and a lot of the things we're doing with our funds to impact all the startups in the state of Michigan. I got a great team, blessed to be able to work with them every day. And that just gets me excited every morning to get up and see if I can give back a little bit and help these companies and help their journey and create some more success for some great people out there that are working very hard.
That's awesome. Preem, how about you? What's the passion that drives you into this? You've been in the venture world, and you keep coming back for more. What gets you up in the morning?
Sure. Yeah. No, I started in the early investment space about 10 years ago. And I actually went the opposite way that everybody else seems to be going. I started further downstream, and I just really enjoy working with companies that are upstream. That's my passion, finding coachable entrepreneurs who are disrupting versus iterating. They're kind of like, gems in the rough, right? So working with them, providing them support and resources. These are all hairy companies, but it's really satisfying to see when they, first crawl and then slowly walk and begin to run. So I started off doing about 2 or 3 deals a year, and with Michigan Rise, we're doing about a deal a week. So
Wow.
maybe we're just crazy, and gray hair or no hair, as the case may be. But it's a lot of fun to be able to do that. So that's my passion.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Well, I know that when we talked before, you had each given me some examples of things that have impacted you. And I remember, Jeff, you and I were talking about how sometimes you approach a problem and you approach a team and you just sort of feel like you instinctively understand, based on your experience, the kinds of things they need to be thinking about, what needs to happen from an organizational standpoint, a growth standpoint. But oftentimes teams that haven't been there before, and frankly, that's a lot of startups and it's a lot of new product development. No shame for that. You got to start somewhere, and you got to get the gumption to go try something. But maybe sometimes that team doesn't get it. Can you give us an example for the audience of places where, or an example of where you've seen that sort of a thing, where the team is charging along gung ho, you're seeing something, they're not seeing it, and how you approach that to communicate that? And we know that one of the big roles of an investor is not just the funds, it's also this coaching and this coming alongside. Give us an example of a place where you've seen that coming and tried to head it off its pass.
Yeah, we're blessed to work with great entrepreneurs who work hard and they're very passionate about their businesses, and they're in the weeds a lot. So it's great to be, sitting there as coaches that can step back with them and try to instinctively show them something that they might not be missing, or an opportunity that exists that they hadn't thought about. I think one of the keys for us too is building a relationship with the people we work with. I think if we have a positive relationship and get to know each other, I think that advice is taken better than if not. So I think we really work hard to be involved with our companies um, and really build upon every day with them ideas and thoughts. We've had companies. We've invested in a company this year that 2 years ago we said no to. So I think one of those things that you want to do is be honest with people, give them good advice. When there's opportunities to improve something that's not ready, show them a path of how to do that, and then continue to follow up with them and monitor them. Things change. I think there's so many companies out there that where they start is not where they finish. So I think we all have to be open to that and know it's a process.
It's interesting about that. So this idea of being open to what are fundamentally flaws right at that point in time, and that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to stomach because we all want perfection. We want perfection at all points, and you're saying, okay, we don't expect perfection at all points. We expect this to be a growth process for the team, but there have to be some fatal flaws. There have to be some places where if you see a characteristic, you don't say, oh, we can grow through this. How do you make that distinction in your own thought process?
I'll go first and I'll let Preem jump in. You know, I
Well,
think
I got more questions for Preem too, so I'm gonna pepper both of you.
okay. I think one of the hardest thing is, you know, obviously we want somebody we can work with, somebody that we can coach. You know, the attitude of the founder is very critical. We need somebody that's going to be a partner. It's like a marriage. It's been described as that. Many people use that term. So we're not perfect. We don't expect that perfect person to be perfect, but we better be able to coach each other, work with each other, and move the path along. You know, the other thing that goes beyond that is, do we have a team? You know, single founder startups are a problem. They usually lead to a bad place. There's exceptions to that, but we all know there's a lot of heavy lifting in startups, and developing that team today and where it's going to go from here and building the culture and the dynamics that they all work together in a positive way is really critical. So, you know, we've seen technology start here and end up in another place, but it's really hard to change if you start out with a founder that's not willing to be coached. And that's probably it's very difficult. And
So
I
if a
do,
team's, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I do have a few gray hairs. So I try to coach because I've been around the block a lot and I've grown myself in terms of my leadership. So I try to get through to those that are challenging. But at the end of the day, if it's not going to work, it's better that they go work with somebody else. So that's probably the one thing we stick to hard.
I think it's an interesting point you make that the coachability, the lack thereof, can be a fatal flaw, and a single founder startup is evident. It may not be evidence, but it could be an indicator that there's not coachability, because if they haven't brought others around them, then maybe or maybe not they are coachable. So something to watch out for. Over to Preem for a second. Preem, when we talked earlier, you had said you like to look at startups like puzzles, and I'm a puzzle person, and I come from a stock of puzzle people. I'm going to turn the same question to you, but using the metaphor of a puzzle. So when you're looking at these teams as puzzles, and I love Jeff's comment about how there sort of has to be the willingness to build a team
Yep.
that is inherently tied with this idea of coachability.
Yep.
Can you give us any examples of places where you have encountered a puzzle and had to solve it? Give us some maybe obfuscated anecdotes.
Sure. Yeah. You know, a company comes to mind where the founders had been very diligent in their, you know, previous careers at large corporations, and were starting a company with a BHAG, you know, big, hairy, audacious goal, where everybody said, "This is never going to work out. Just walk away from this." And that's a bit of a challenge. That's a puzzle, right? Because I knew the founders, I knew the market was large, I knew their plan and what they wanted to do, and they kind of had built an MVP with pins and rubber bands, and they had potential end users wanting to invest in them. So when the conventional wisdom was, you know, walk away, run away, but it had the ingredients. It was hairy, it was messy, but I kind of approached that as a puzzle, kind of advised them, mentored them, eventually was able to invest in them. And, you know, they're doing great today. You know, revenue generating and on course to do great things. So that's probably how I kind of look at it as a puzzle.
That's awesome. I love that. I want to give you guys a chance to tell us, because I think a lot of times we're all in this huge ecosystem together, and we've got this sort of a vague sense of, oh, this person's kind of over there doing that, and that person's kind of over there doing that. And I think Jeff, can you take us a step back to the MSU Foundation ecosystem? You've got Spartan Innovations. We had Frank Urban on a number of weeks ago. You've got Red Cedar Ventures. You've got Michigan Rise now. Give us a 50,000-foot view of what's happening and the epicenter, and then the ripples coming out to the whole state.
Okay. The Michigan State Foundation has 4 subsidiaries. There's Spartan Innovation, Red Cedar Ventures, Michigan Rise, and UCRP. I'm the executive director of 3 of those. So when you look at the bigger organization and you come in as a whole, I think for people that are out there, it's important to know we have programming to help startups. We have an accelerator. We have funding. We have coaches and entrepreneurs and residents. We have a full slate of capabilities to help startups. Particularly around Red Cedar Ventures. Red Cedar Ventures, I started with the group about 3 years ago, initially with about 20 investments. When I came in, we're up to about 60. We're making about 20 investments a year. We've invested over $6 million. Those companies have gone on to raise an additional $250 million, which is kind of a cool stat that we've had that much success in just 3 years. One of the cool things too, I think there's over 100 and some million of those funds that have come back to the state of Michigan from outside VCs. So that's a great thing for the state. When you look at Red Cedar Ventures, it's kind of around that MSU DNA. That's how I would describe the fund. We have things coming out working from the tech transfer side of great folks that work with us that come out of the university. We work with the Burgess Innovation Center for the student startups. Now that we have the wet lab space down the road from us and we have tenants in our TIC, we have an ecosystem of tenants that we work with and can fund. And then we have the whole MSU community, the $700 million in research and the talented faculty, anything that kind of connects that wants to come back and work with the university kind of fills into that DNA space. So we got a whole ecosystem around MSU, and Red Cedar is really set up to support that and fund those opportunities to give them the best chance to get to commercialization and do some connectivity, bringing things to the university that might not come otherwise. So, and then Michigan Rise, I'll let Preem describe Michigan Rise.
Sure. So when Jeff took over Red Cedar Ventures, he just shared the stats with you. So we had built a body of work, some pretty cool metrics there. The state of Michigan, MEDC, put out an RFP in January this year, and we said, hey, let's try out, for this RFP. After a pretty competitive process, we were announced as the awardees of the Pre-Seed Fund 3, which is supported by both MSU Foundation and the MEDC. And so now we are able to leverage the infrastructure, the programming that we had built at MSU and the MSU ecosystem to the statewide ecosystem. So we had already been working with companies that were just, adjacent to the MSU ecosystem, but now we are able to not just support them, but also fund them and bring value-added support in the form of our program infrastructure, such as Spartan Innovations. We have subject matter experts in life sciences and physical sciences who can help our portfolio companies get to inflection points as they commercialize.
And Gene, as you know, there's just not enough early capital for startups. So we're fortunate enough, we have 2 funds that we're able to manage and, hopefully solve that gap problem for these entrepreneurs. And so we're looking to make a difference in the state. We love the collaboration of all the partners in the state. And we're just hoping to be a value-added service and continue to grow with everybody else to make a difference.
I think it's so exciting how folks in the state, yourselves included, are looking for those gaps and then putting things in place to fill them. I feel like the days of, we're going to do everything soup to nuts are gone. And I'm so glad they're gone because I'm seeing people really getting in there and saying, here's our unique value, here's how we can deliver it. And I see you guys doing that, which is really cool. Give us a little bit of, if I were a startup coming, and now for Red Cedar Ventures, I have to have some MSU affiliation. For Michigan Rise, I don't. Let's start with Red Cedar Ventures, because my understanding, and I may be wrong on this, but my understanding is that it may differ from other programs at other schools in the exact stage at which you can do it. It feels to me, and I may be wrong, but it feels to me like it's a little bit broader, like you have the ability to get in there and fund at quite a few different phases with Red Cedar. But let you talk about what are the criteria. I'm a startup, I have some affiliation with MSU. What kind of affiliation do I have to have? What criteria do I have to have walking through the door to be a credible Red Cedar applicant?
Yeah, so let me give you some good examples. So if it came out of tech transfer, we could be working with Spartan Innovations and working on an idea. So as that idea starts to get formed and we put a team to it and help that company, if it starts to need to be funding available, Red Cedar would jump in. So we're working with very early startups there. But at the same time, Red Cedar has the capability to grow with companies as they grow. So, we can tranche investments up to hundreds of thousands of dollars with our pre-seed fund in Red Cedar. But what's more exciting is those opportunities kind of take shape. We all want them to have validation. Angels and VCs come in. And if we're fortunate enough to get those companies to that position, we have a secondary fund in Red Cedar called our Opportunity Fund, where we can go in and write checks that are over $250,000 and above. So what I think is really rewarding, there's so many people that work in different segments. With Red Cedar, really have the opportunity to follow the company for life and be involved at every stage from the idea to kind of that full scale commercialization. So that's really a cool thing that we have there. The thing people might not think about with Red Cedar though is those collaborations with other, there could be we have a company in Minnesota as an opportunity where there was a young startup there in the tech space, and he had a digital coaching platform that would make a difference for students. So we were fortunate enough to bring that back to MSU and impact students in a positive way. So now as they're taking tests and they're going through COVID and all those things, we can monitor and see what kind of data and the impact on kids. But we made that connection through Minnesota back to MSU and supported that entrepreneur with Red Cedar Ventures. So we deal with companies at all stages, and we can connect those dots in a variety of ways just because of the depth and the breadth of our funds and our reach.
That's amazing. So what does somebody have to have in terms of a connection to MSU in order to approach Red Cedar? You say a lot of them are tech transfer and things like that, but can you put boundaries around that?
I can, but it's difficult to do that in specific ways. If you're a tenant, you could come in and be part of our ecosystem. You could be working out of our wet lab space. So if you're taking space from us, that fits really good. If you come out of the MSU, like you're a faculty or you go through tech transfer or you're a student, that fits. But then the ones that are harder are the ones that, hey, we would like to work with the medical school, or we have the FRIB there at MSU, or we have something that could impact the MSU ecosystem in a positive way. We have some great universities in the state that have such high power capabilities. So if we can connect those dots, there might be an opportunity with Red Cedar.
That's great. You guys have the flexibility to do that. Preem, yeah.
Yeah, I can maybe give you a good use case for the last point that Jeff made. So Lansing is home to one of the 4 medical radioisotope companies in the country, Niowave, right? It's been there kind of under the radar. They've been doing some fantastic work. They have leveraged federal funding to bring a lot of value to the medical radioisotope space. Late last year, I think, or maybe it was earlier this year, Jeff, we connected them to the veterinary school at MSU. And one of the ways we can work with companies like that is a faculty member at the vet school is now partnering up with Niowave. So our investment kind of led to that relationship. So when we see opportunities like that, we can support those companies. Now, what that is doing is it's going to spin out technology from MSU. MSU is home to the #1 ranked nuclear physics program in the country. MSU is blessed to have a vet school, school of osteopathic medicine, school of allopathic medicine, and I believe a nursing school as well, Jeff. So there's a lot of ways that we can make those connections for industry back to the university. And should there be good potential for that, that's where Red Cedar Ventures can come in and support with funding as well.
Very cool. Great example. Love those case studies too. Well, Preem, maybe you want to take us over to Rise. I think the same question applies to Rise, which has even more flexibility, and it's funded by the state of Michigan. It's called the Pre-Seed 3 Fund, right? That's the name behind it. Tell us a little bit more about that, where the funding came from, and what the entrance criteria are. What should a company be thinking about if they're thinking about approaching you?
Sure. We position ourselves as an early fund. as you know, Gene, over time, folks who had appetite for some of the earlier stage companies, they've moved downstream. And so MEDC has been very diligent about plugging those gaps across the state, whether it be through their programs at the university level, such as MTRAC, whether it is our friends at IDV, or our program, which is a little further downstream from IDV. So this is the third iteration of the pre-seed fund. The first two were with Spark and Invest Michigan. But we see ourselves as shepherding the companies to a point where they become attractive for downstream investors, whether they be institutional funds. They're still early stage, but what they define as early stage is different from what we see as early stage, right? So the program itself, the first tranche has been 3 million from the MEDC. It's been matched by 900,000 from MSU Foundation. We expect that to grow over the next 5 years. Just some, technicalities for the program. We have the ability to invest up to 250,000 per portfolio company, and we typically do it in a tranche fashion.
Yeah, it's a great collaboration. We're just so thankful to the MEDC and the Michigan Strategic Fund to be working with them, as well as the SBDC. They have all those capabilities connected with our ecosystem that has a tremendous bench of talent and resources. I think whether it's Michigan Rise or Red Cedar, you bring all that together, there's a lot of value adds for the startups, and we're just working really hard to make sure those happen.
Well, that's
one
amazing.
of the keys, I think, for the way we see our success is working with the ecosystem, right? So we are being very intentional about reaching out to the smart zones. We have MOUs with several investing partners across the state. So we want to work alongside with everybody else who have a similar mission. We do want to invest in high-tech, high-growth companies, but we also want to keep an eye on bringing the entire Michigan ecosystem up as well.
That's phenomenal. To that end, I guess a question for you guys would be, if anyone's listening live today or listening to the recording afterwards, who do you want to connect with?
I think we, as you look at connections, we want to make sure that we give the best opportunities in the state a chance to get to commercialization. So any entrepreneurs that are out there in the state of Michigan that we can help, we want to connect with them. If they don't know of us, it's great that we're on a show like this to be able to reach out. Obviously, it takes a lot of people to make entrepreneurs successful. I think Prem and I have pretty good relationships throughout the state with the ecosystem, but we're always looking to expand that and do more to connect to those key spots. So whether it's all the smart zones or whether it's the angels in the state or the venture renaissance or any of those key players that are so important to these startups, we're working on a regular basis to communicate, cultivate, and see where those opportunities are. But I guess my 2 cents is if we haven't connected with you and you're part of the ecosystem, our phones are open and we're happy to get on a call and talk to you and see how we can work together.
Reach out.
No,
go ahead.
The best way to do that would be our website. We have a very simple, easy 3-minute application. You can send your information and contact info through there, and we'll be in touch.
And Prem, is that just for the startups or is that for any partner in the ecosystem?
Our contact info is there, so any partner in the ecosystem as well. But if they're seeking funding, we have a pretty simple application process on there.
Awesome. And maybe you can drop that website into the chat with all panelists and all attendees so that we can get that out there as well. I want to open it up to our audience for questions. If you have a question for Jeff or for Prem, feel free to raise your hand or to type it in the Q&A box. We would love to hear from you. We'll give it a minute here. Our friend Ken Spencer is live. Ken.
Yeah, so thanks very much. So Prem, I did look at your website and you're right, the application is really simple. So thank you for that. I work with University of Michigan at MCERC there, and we are actually working with a fellow from University of Cincinnati, Dr. Dave Smith, and we're using our large animal lab to work with him on some very cool stuff that he's working with. Uh, and we have a Michigan PI there, and they will go through our Grand Challenge Massey Foundation thing for funding this year. Now, if is that a close enough Michigan connection that we could look to go to Michigan Rise for some follow-on funding?
Yeah, I mean, the program is funded by the MEDC and MSU Foundation. So the eligibility criteria for funding from Michigan Rise is that the company is headquartered in Michigan and have a majority of their employees, founders be based in Michigan. They don't necessarily have to be that today, but as the company grows and builds the relationships, by the point we invest, if they can kind of meet that criteria, then yes, we would be able to support them with our funding as well as the program.
Good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, Ken. We appreciate that. Let's see if we have any other questions for Jeff and for Preem. We have not seeing any more questions here, but I think this is just phenomenal what you guys are doing. And I think it's really neat how the parameters are really gap filling, right? Because so many times it's something that if you're in a particular group, you can get funding and it gets you that first step. And then the question comes, where does the next step come? And as you pointed out, Preem, a lot of times the gap between where a real venture capital firm might actually come in seems to be getting later and later and later. And you guys are stepping in to fill that kind of gap. So we in the state really appreciate that immensely. Any last words for our audience or things you'd like us to carry away from today? I thought the points were great about building the team, working it as a puzzle. The only fatal flaw is the unwillingness to do that, the unwillingness to build the team and to learn from it. But any other last comments?
I just comment to everybody. I just think it's a great time for startups in the Midwest. There's a lot of people that have come before us and done a lot of good work, but there seems to be great momentum around the state and around the Midwest right now. I think I just like to salute all the people that have done all the hard work before us and looking forward to what's coming up in the next few years. Innovation is, if there's anything in COVID that has shown us is that innovation is so critical. If we're going to fight this disease and everything that's going on, we're going to have to continue to innovate in new ways and do it faster and faster as years go on. So quite impactful opportunities for us exist. And it's just a great time to be part of it and try to help.
We're glad you guys are there. And I thank you for what you're doing, the gap filling that you're doing, and for being on the show with us today. Jeff and Preem, thank you.
Thanks.
It's exciting to see the ecosystem doing so many cool things and growing, and we're thankful to MEDC also for funding the Michigan Rise Fund. I want to welcome next my guest, Taylor McPartland, CEO of Scale Health. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for your patience. So we want to tell folks about what you guys are doing at Scale Health, and then a little bit later on, we want to bring on, because you're actually, you started in LA, mm-hmm. and I think it used to be Scale LA, and now you guys are Scale Health. You're going national with it. You're in this innovation and med device ecosystem. I guess I want to start with you, though, in the same place we start with all our guests, which is, what's your passion, Taylor?
It's a great question, and we heard some great answers before. But for me, just it's very similar in a lot of ways. Like I'm very passionate first and foremost about working with entrepreneurs, and I think that it's no secret that building a company from the ground up, building a startup is incredibly hard. And as we all know, working in the healthcare industry is also incredibly challenging and incredibly hard. And the entrepreneurs that decide to bring those two together and innovate and create a company within the health med tech industry is a really special breed. And I want to do everything that I can do. And, it goes to the core of what Scale Health is all about, is really trying to do as much of the blocking and tackling for those innovators as we can, so that they can do the work that is the hard enough work of actually building a strong company, securing that investment, and getting it out into the market so that it can really begin to have a positive impact on our cities and our society.
Now, you guys describe yourselves as a health innovation ecosystem, not as a funder, not as an accelerator, for example. Tell us a little bit more about how Scale Health is positioning itself, and also a little bit about your background, because I was looking at your bio, and you actually started this in LA. It sounds like it may have started as a local effort, and now you're reaching out nationally, which is what we're going to talk about, the Michigan connection, here in a minute. But tell us about how you got started and what your focus is. What area are you trying to work in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, quick background on myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Originally from Northern California, I came down to the LA area, founded a company shortly after college, and was fortunate enough to, although I founded it from knowing very little about innovation and entrepreneurship and what it meant to be a founder, I was fortunate enough to learn as I went along, and kept that company afloat, and was able to fortunately sell it in after about 6 years. And then after that company, that's when I started really taking a step back and thinking about what I was passionate about. And the core of that was really around like working with other entrepreneurs that were trying to tackle really hard systemic challenges. You're right. Originally, we started much more local, much more in the greater LA area. But as we heard before, as Jeff was saying, now with COVID, even more than it was before, health and wellness is not a local issue, and the playing field is really level, and we all need to really be able to work together so that we can flatten the curve that you were mentioning with spiking earlier, and make sure that as a country and as a world, we're in a position to improve our mind, body, and soul as much as we can. From that standpoint, we at Scale Health, we work with all types of healthcare companies. So we'll work with med tech and device, digital health, mental health, and our goal is to use our methodology, use our technology, and use our extensive network of investment funds, of startups, of thought leaders, of payers, providers, government, to be able to, in a very systematic way, accelerate the growth of our startups that we work with, and really be their sidekick. So no matter whether they're a really early stage entrepreneur with an idea, or they're already doing 10, 20, 50 million in annual revenue, we want to be there alongside of them to be able to say, we think you could be a good fit to pitch this investor, or we think you could be a good fit to have a conversation with this potential strategic partner that may end up acquiring you, or you need to meet with this advisor or this consultant.
Sounds like your currency there is the connections and the network ability of the organization. How big is Scale Health, and what kinds of relationships are you cultivating?
So we have about 210 startup companies that we work directly with any given day, and they do run the gamut from early stage to relatively large companies. We also work with about 100 plus investment funds, and then and several hundred of those partners that I mentioned, whether they be large, really large health systems, large insurers, or those thought leaders that maybe they've exited out of their own company, maybe they've recently retired after a career as an executive at a payer or at a hospital, and now they just want to give back to startups. And so what we'll do is we'll work hand in hand with our companies to say, Jeff, love what you're doing. We think you should meet with Gene, or you should meet with Preem. And really, by connecting those dots, bringing the right people together that might not have otherwise known each other or could not have known each other. Our hope is and we believe that we can accelerate that progress that we're seeing in this industry.
That's cool. And you're doing this, like you said, virtually, although you guys have physical space, I think, in LA, right? You guys have a space there as well.
We
Oh,
do.
very cool. What I want to do is I want to bring on our friends Stacy Frankovich from TechTown, as well as Johnny Lamb, who's your VP there at Scale Health, because we want to now understand the Michigan connection. We understand that TechTown and MedHealth are doing a partnership with Scale Health, and I think Stacy, we want to go over to you for a minute and hear about some of this connection. Although I guess maybe we'll go to Taylor first for what is the Michigan connection? Here's this organization, it's going nationally. Why Michigan? Why now? And we'll go there first to Taylor.
I think Jeff touched on it earlier, just talking about the amazing entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem that is the Detroit, is the Michigan area. We've been friends and supporters from afar for quite a while, and then certainly as COVID has set in, it became much simpler for all of us in a virtual world to be able to start collaborating more directly, and for us to be able to be able to bring our Scale Health ecosystem in to support the great work that's already happening in Michigan, and then on the flip side of that, be able to allow Michigan innovators and entrepreneurs to be able to tap into a global network without needing to relocate to a Silicon Valley. So that the hope being that there can be increased opportunity, increased ability to succeed, and stay local, succeed in the area, and then reinvest in that next generation of strong entrepreneurs that Prem was referencing.
That's great. Stacy, tell us about this from MedHealth and TechTown's perspective and what this partnership is about.
Sure. So I think Taylor hit the nail on the head too with we're living in a more virtual world. So MedHealth is a regional ecosystem. We serve Southeast Michigan and Southwest Ontario. COVID has provided kind of this unique opportunity and pushed us into a virtual environment where the timing seemed right to kind of expand our network. So as Taylor mentioned, Scale Health brings this huge network of resource partners, payers, providers, investors, and innovators. So, they work with about 210, I think Taylor mentioned 210, I had 250 in my notes, so somewhere in there.
You might be right.
We'll call it 250. The fish was that big. But it's so exciting to be able to work completely across the USA as closely as we are with Scale Health to bring access to these great resources to the LA community and their national community, and bring that LA community and expose them to, and most importantly, I would say expose them to the great opportunity in the Detroit region and the Southwest Ontario region. We work very closely across that border, and we do really exciting, great work here. And this is giving us the opportunity to kind of shout it from the rooftops at a more national level, and provide that great synergy and working together just to make that ecosystem that much bigger.
Well, we love nothing more than growing ecosystems. Now, you guys are having an event. You had one on, I believe it was I'm going to get this wrong, the 22nd or the 23rd, a webinar about Scale Health and the partnership with MedHealth and TechTown. But you have another one coming up, and that's the news we wanted to get out today. That's coming up November 5th. And Johnny Lamb maybe can share a little bit more with us about what that webinar is going to be all about.
Sure.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us, Gene. Yeah, I mean, essentially, we would just want to spread the gospel, right? Especially about our partnership with, MedHealth and TechTown, and like Stacy said, kind of get on the roof and just kind of yell from the top of our lungs about what we're doing, how we can kind of do it for startups in the Detroit, Michigan space, and just really kind of offer our resources and our relationships.
Great. How can people get in touch? I see you posted the link here, which is an Eventbrite link, which we will make available to folks. And I think it's all panelists and all attendees can get to it there. Is there a Scale Health or TechTown link to that as well that folks can drill down from if they go to the either the Scale Health or the TechTown website? Is that also available there by any chance?
We
I
have it
believe,
on
I
the
believe, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm
Susan.
sorry, Johnny. We have it on the Med Health website, and we also have. I mean, we're throwing it out on LinkedIn and Twitter, and anywhere we can.
Okay, and so
Exactly.
for oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say exactly the same for us, right? We're kind of, spreading the word everywhere, LinkedIn, even Instagram, anywhere that, will kind of have us to our following, right? So
Great. Stacy, tell us again. So if we go through the Med Health website, that's medhealthinnovation.org. Do I have that correct?
Yep, and I just put it in the chat.
Great. So if folks want to get there and you happen to be listening to the video afterwards, you can go to medhealthinnovation.org and drill your way down to the November 5th Scale Health webinar and find out more about what Scale Health and Med Health are doing together. I want to open it up to our audience in case we have any questions live here today. Feel free to raise your hand if you got questions about Scale Health, TechTown, Med Health. We've got the folks here to answer those for you. And we'll give it just a second in case we have any. Ken Spencer's live with us.
Eugene, thanks. I apologize for keep asking all these questions, but
We love your questions, Ken.
So listen, one of the gaps besides just funding and stuff that we've run into is that many of the innovations that we've funded and gone out and started companies up from MCERC and University of Michigan is that the doctors and things that are working on these innovations have a real passion, to your point, and it's not actually startups, right? It's actually their day job. And so there's been a big gap in trying to find CEOs and the management around, these things that have been proven technologies right out there. And so while I always used to refer to what we have, at least in the MCERC area in Michigan, as one of the great accelerators in the world, what we're missing is a commercialator, as I call it. And so I'm wondering if Scale Health has ever thought about, grouping, technologies and things under, a management team that can amortize costs for FDA approvals and everything else that's out there.
What a great, I don't know why Ken apologizes for asking questions because that was a beautiful one. We do have this problem of startup CEO leadership, fundraising ability, et cetera, in the Michigan ecosystem. They do exist, but it can often be hard to come by. What do you guys say to that?
Yeah, we that is a great question, Ken, and a couple different answers for that. Like first off, within our network, we do have this vast network of executives who, Johnny and I were actually just on a call this morning with one who's stepping down as the founder CEO of a successful company in the health space, and was reaching out to us saying, I'm looking to get back in the game with a really cool piece of IP that is, and a good team that's looking for that seasoned CEO to lead them and to turn them into take this great concept, this important concept, and get it commercial ready and get it into the market and handle the business side of things. So certainly one on that front, that's absolutely where we can help and where we do look forward to helping, because it sounds like that's there's definitely a need and opportunity there. And then also, Ken, to your point around packaging IP, that's an idea that we've been floating around a little bit as well. For looking at the best ways to be able to identify IP, identify solutions, and then internally leverage our existing network and our resources to be able to package that and turn that into a suite of tools or a suite of solutions that can address in a very hand in glove way what a community, what a hospital, what a payer might need. And so great questions. And yeah, definitely want to be able to provide value on both of those fronts.
Great
And
question.
real
Great answer.
and Gene, real
Yeah,
quick,
Johnny.
just kind of piggyback off that, we've definitely come across that kind of problem statement before too, right? Where doctors in their clinical lives kind of run into that problem, and that's why we also kind of partner with SOAP, which is a Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, where doctors come into problems and then they take it upon themselves to try to fix that problem, but the core that roadblock that they kind of run into is they're doctors. They don't know how to run and scale a business, right? So then they connect with SOAP. We connect with SOAP, and then we kind of bridge that gap, right? So we've definitely run into that problem, and we've addressed it very well. So we have a number of doctors on our advisory board, as well as helping doctors as well. So we really leverage our resources and our relationships to really help companies grow and scale and get further traction.
That's awesome. Thanks for bringing that up, Johnny. That's a good point. Good. Ken, thank you for the question. Taylor and Johnny, thank you for those thoughts. I guess Taylor, Johnny, and Stacy, any parting thoughts for the group? Otherwise, I want people to tune in to on November 5th, and you can get there through medhealthinnovation.org to register for that webinar with Scale Health. Any other parting comments for us?
I would just, thank you, Gene, for having us. You're always such a great partner to MedHealth and helping us get our message out. And yeah, please join us on the 5th. Scale has put together a fantastic platform that really helps innovators find the right connections at the right time. And we're excited about what this partnership can really collaboratively pull together and offer. So thanks again, Gene. It's always a pleasure to come and be on your show.
We appreciate having you guys here. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Definitely. See you guys on November 5th.
And if anyone has any other additional questions, I just put my email in the chat here, and would love all feedback on ways that we can continue to support the Michigan ecosystem. So looking forward to staying in touch, and a big thank you for letting us join.
Taylor, for the recording, can you just read that off?
Yeah, my first name, Taylor, Taylor @scalehealth.com.
Great. And Stacy threw hers in there. Stacy, can you just read that off for us for the recording?
Sure. It's Stacy @medhealthinnovation.org.
Great. And that's STACEY, as well as Johnny's JOHNNY @scalehealth.com. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Well, as always, we are excited to be here with you again today. I want to ask if there's any questions from our audience about any subject that we've talked about on the show any week before, any challenge that you're running into in your efforts to bring medical technology to our community. Give a few seconds here for any questions or announcements. As you know, if there's a community announcement that we need to know about and you want to get the word out, this is a great time to do it. Just let us know, and you're welcome to come on and tell the community about what's going on inside your organization that the community needs to remember. As we talked earlier, and then we do have one here, as we talked earlier, we are going to continue to add the COVID Connect section back into our show because it is something that's coming back. So we're going to be tracking those numbers every week at the beginning of the show for as long as is necessary. Ken Spencer, you're live.
Yeah, so Gene, sorry again, but so
It's great to hear your voice.
we talked about COVID there, and I saw the increasing numbers in terms of tests. You showed that spike. Does that include antigen tests and or PCRs, both? Is it all kinds of tests, or is it just one test that we're focusing on here?
That is a great question, Ken. The COVID tracking site, I'll take a quick look here. I'll follow up with you afterwards, and we can mention it next week. I don't have directly which that is. I believe it's tests that they believe are representative of somebody having the disease at that point in time. That would be the only reasonable way to interpret their daily cases, would be folks with the disease. So I'm going to assume that it's not antibody, but we'll follow up with that and confirm that for you. And of course, as you recall, the caseload goes up, but the hospitalization and deaths are maybe more important and what fluctuate, but are coming up right now.
Right, and is there graphs available for positivity rates and how things are reacting across the state there too?
I believe they do exist. We don't have them queued up, but I tell you what, we're going to bring that into the COVID Connect segment next week. The distinction between antibody and PCR, and then also the positivity rates, and we will have those for you next week.
Well, thank you, Gene.
Yeah, great question. Always appreciate it. We'll give just a second for any other questions or comments. Community announcements. This would be your time. If you want to tell us about something happening with your company or you're in the larger community, feel free. This can be self-serving. Don't feel like this has to be something, because there's always stuff that people are interested in attending and doing. So feel free to reach out. We'll give it just about another 5 seconds. Raise your hand if you have a comment. Otherwise, thank you for joining us on this 33rd episode of MedTech Crossroads. We're looking forward to being with you again next week, and we are going to answer those questions that Ken raised about positivity rates, as well as about what types of tests have been done. And we're going to start to press into what on earth is happening here with COVID. It is coming back up. Can't deny that. We want to know what's happening. So we'll talk more about that next week, as well as our usual guests. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for being here.